So we are opening a new series called The Weird and the Wonderful. And this made me think of, have any of you seen that meme out there that says it's like me, colon, hey friend, come to my church on Sunday. It's not weird. And then the next line is my church that Sunday. And it's something crazy that happens in a church. I can remember feeling this. I invited my friend Cody when we were in high school to church. And he was like, is your church one of those weird churches? And I was like, no, man, it's just a normal church. The only one I've really been to. And suddenly, as he's standing next to me that Sunday morning, I realized everything about my church is weird. If you don't know, if you didn't grow up going to church, if you didn't at least visit on Easter and Christmas, and you walk into a church, you would think, wow, this is weird. And yet, hopefully, something magnetic about that weirdness and about that wonderfulness. So a few years ago, the writer, author, speaker, Tom Holland, anybody heard of him? He was asked by a group of church leaders, what would you like to see from the church? And he's not a Christian. He's a self-described agnostic, but he does have a sincere appreciation for the capital C church and its place in our society and our culture. Even going as far as to say that the West as we know it, Western culture as we know it, wouldn't be here if it weren't for Christianity. So in reply to these church leaders, he said, you should talk more about the weird stuff. So we're going to be talking about the weird stuff. Now, often the way something is initiated, the way a movement is birthed, there's a particular DNA, there's a particular set of circumstances around how a thing is birthed that as long as that DNA is maintained, will carry a movement, a company, a person forward. But I was thinking of some things like, for example, did you know that McDonald's, it was birthed as just a standalone restaurant by two brothers, and their vision was to use quality ingredients, but to sort of like project how much food they'll sell in an hour, and to begin the process of cooking that food so that when you come to order the food, it's basically ready. It's coming fresh off the grill. Now that was how it was birthed. Then along came a guy named Ray Kroc. And Ray Kroc loved what they were doing and thought, we've got to expand this. And so what he did is he came on board in a sort of like, let me help you find real estate, and you do your McDonald's thing. You train up people how you would train them. I wanted to have your DNA. And what he did was he financed all of the real estate himself, and it got to the point where the Kroc brothers, the brothers who founded McDonald's were indebted to him, and suddenly he owned their company. And the trajectory of that grow fast, the DNA changed. And so now when you go to McDonald's, is it the best ingredients? No. Is it fresh off the grill? No. It's microwaves, and I don't even know what they've got back there. But are they successful? Yes, but you could argue that it's not now what it was originally meant to be. This happens sometimes. I was thinking about Michael Jackson. Like Michael Jackson, his body started changing. There's a disease that sometimes people get where there's like, especially for African Americans or black people, where their skin can start to change color in patches. And so he began bleaching his skin because he wanted it to be even out. And then from that point, he also began changing his features. And so the person that he started out did not look like the person he ended up being. Still incredibly talented. But what I'm trying to show us is that how a thing is birthed should be maintained throughout. Now, we're going to look at some scriptures that show us how the Christian movement was birthed. Now, before I read this, I want to tell you a little bit of a weird and wonderful story about my family. So, in 2011, Randy and I we were engaged to be married, and this might have been 2010, late 2010, early 2011. I was living with my grandmother, and a friend of mine, my friend Brian Hall, he was just getting into becoming a tattoo artist. And he said, "Hey, I'd like to give you a wedding gift." Guess what it was going to be? A tattoo. I said to him, "That's awesome. I know exactly what I want." So and Randy and I had been talking about becoming missionaries and sort of like, forsaking all and just going wherever the Lord would call us. And eventually we did together get married and go to live for 6 years in Thailand. And so I had heard this story about these two Moravian missionaries. And there was this Moravian prayer movement, and from that movement birthed a mission-sending movement that really had been lost by the Protestant church. So the Catholics, the church had sent out missionaries who had built missions in difficult places. But from the Protestant Reformation forward, they really lost that. There was a lot of inward debate about how do we set up what we believe, and there were factions, and it's like there's a joke that like basically once we had the Protestant Reformation as Christians, us Protestants, we got really good at dividing, didn't we? And so there became this movement and that movement and this movement and that movement. And so we really lost that missional heart at the birth of the Protestant movement. But it was regained in large part by the Moravian movement. And so these Moravians, these two missionaries, they heard about this island in the Virgin Islands, and I think it's St. Thomas, and they heard about how this atheist slave trader, he kept that island, and he kept slaves there, and they said, "We want to go be missionaries to those people on that island." And he said, "Okay, but the only way you're coming to my island is as my slave." And so they sold themselves into slavery to him, and they brought their caskets with them to the harbor, and they boarded the ship. And as their ship pulled out of the harbor, their families and their friends who were sending them were weeping. They knew they'd never see these young men again. And these young men, they yelled out from the bow of the ship, "May the lamb that was slain receive the reward of his suffering." And I said, "Brian, I want that tattooed on me." And so I have that tattoo here. But I said, I don't want to wait until after the wedding, because we're supposed to go to Florida, and we'll be in the sun, and you're not supposed to, like have a fresh tattoo in the sun or in salt water or, all these things, right? So he said, "No problem. I'll do it early enough so that it heals up." Well, at the time, so he did it. So he did the tattoo. At the time, I was living with my grandmother, and my grandmother, when I say she's old school, like she was old school before old school. And so it was in a place where as long as I had a t-shirt on, she wouldn't see it. I wouldn't offend her. I was worried about offending her. So one day she told me she was going to lunch with a couple of her friends. I said, great, I'll see you later this evening. I heard the door open and shut, and so I came out of my room, and I wasn't wearing a shirt. I went to the refrigerator. I opened the refrigerator. I got the milk, started drinking from the jug, as all 20-something young men do. And I put it back, and I look over, and I see my grandmother. Oh, hi, grandmother. She said, well, I have 2 questions. Do you always drink from the milk jug? And I said, I don't always, but I do often drink from the milk jug. And she said, would you please stop doing that? I said, I'll never do it again. And I haven't to this day. And then she said, the second question I have is, what is that on your side? And I said, well, grandmother, it's a tattoo, but before you start to cast a demon out of me, this is the story. And I recounted the story to her that I just told to you. And she said, I want you to go and get that star. There was a brass star that had been on her counter since I can remember. Go get it and bring it to me. So I went back, put the milk away, got the brass star, and I brought it to her. And I always thought, like, this is an oddly shaped star. It's not symmetric. And so I brought it over here to her, and she said, this is a Moravian star. I keep this because my grandmother was a Native American from the Cherokee tribe, and her parents sent her to a Moravian mission school. And at that school, she became a Christian. And she told me when I was young about her conversion experience. And she taught me about Jesus and who Jesus was to her. And you see, I never would have known that story had I not gotten that tattoo, and not these things all happened, I think, because God wanted me to know that story. He wanted me to keep that part of my heritage alive. Now, you could debate and you could say, well, but what about Leviticus? And we could get into that. But it is a weird and wonderful story for me. And today, so I want to show you a picture. Today, as I was preparing, I came across this picture. This is the Moravian Mission School at Oaks, Cherokee. It's supposed to say Cherokee Nation. That my grandmother's grandmother attended as a young girl. You see, a lot of these mission schools are getting flack these days because they did in some ways take culture from these people. But in all honesty, it was the only way that these people were going to survive, if they would become cultured. And so these Moravian missionaries went out to the most difficult places. The next slide is a quote from a Lutheran who took over from the Moravians. And I just want you to just read this. So it says, missionary work among the Native Americans was a slow and trying process. Not until 1989 did Reverend Nielsen experience the joy of baptizing his first convert, a girl of 16. When I read this, I started to cry. I don't know that this was my grandmother. I can't say for sure that she was 16 at that school when she became a Christian. But I know the timeline makes sense because my grandmother was born in 1930-something. I read this this morning and I began to weep. You see, being a follower of Jesus, it is weird and it is wonderful, and it will lead you to some weird and wonderful things, weird and wonderful places. And if we're not careful, we can advance to a point where we become, where we change the DNA that's in us, and where we lose an integral part of who God set up, of what God set up this movement called Christianity to be. Okay. So we're going to read from Acts 2. Now, Acts 2 is the sort of birth of the church, right? Jesus had lived on the earth for 33 years. He had ministered for about 3 years, and he had poured everything he had into his followers, and indeed poured his life out on the cross. He was raised again, and then he told his people, I'm going to be going away. I want you to go and to wait. To go and wait until you receive power from on high. So, let's read that account, but I'm going to read it from, and I'm going to have it here on the screen, a Bible that's called the First Nations Version. This is a version that was put together a few years ago by a coalition of Native American theologians. It's in English because, unfortunately, most of the tribes have lost their language. Very few Native Americans these days even speak their languages, and they're all united by the English language. And so we're going to be reading Acts 2 together from this version. Now, in this version, you'll notice a couple of strange things. Names. Someone just tell me a good sounding Native American name. Go ahead. Don't be afraid. You won't offend me. Sitting Bull. Yes, that is a real Native American name. Geronimo. That's a hard one because I don't even know what that means, but except for jumping off of a cliff, right? Running Deer, like these kind of names, like we would say, yeah. So when you read the names of Peter and the disciples, you'll read what their name means, what they would have been called if they were in a Native American tribe, along with their name as we know it in parentheses. So that may be a bit strange. Besides that, I can't think of anything else, but we'll see, won't we? Okay, so in verse 1, it says this: the time for the full meaning of the ancient festival had now arrived. Now this is the Festival of Weeks, which happens 50 days after the Passover. So remember, Jesus was killed on Passover, he rose again, he went away, and then this is the 50 days celebration later. This is I think this was meant to be a harvest festival. The first fruits, right? So, they all had gathered in one place when suddenly the sound of a great windstorm came from the spirit world above and could be heard throughout the house where they were sitting. They saw flames of fire come down from above, separating and resting on their heads. The Holy Spirit had come down upon them and began to fill them with his life and power. New languages began to flow out of their mouths, languages they had never learned, given from the Holy Spirit. The sacred village of peace, that is Jerusalem, was filled with devoted members of the tribes of wrestles with Creator, the tribes of Israel, who had come for the festival from every nation under the sun. A crowd began to gather around when they heard the loud noise. In wonder and amazement, the crowd began to ask, how is it that these people from the circle of nations, that is Galilee, how is it that they're speaking in our many languages? For we can all understand them in the languages of the places we have come from. There are people here for the festival from nations and places close by and far away who are members of the tribes of wrestles with Creator, and those from the outside nations or Gentiles who have been taken into the tribes. They were converts, Gentile converts. They come from, then he lists off the places where these people come from. They come from the land of victory, that is Parthia. The land in the middle, that is Media. The land of the ancient ones, Elam. Many come from the land between rivers, Mesopotamia, or the land of promise, Judea. The land of handsome horses, I like that one, Cappadocia. The land of black waters, Pontus. The land of the rising sun, Asia. Some come from dry wood, Phrygia, and many tribes, Pamphylia, and the territory of the land of tears, Libya, near the village of Strongwall, Cyrene. There are travelers from Village of Iron, that is Rome, both tribal members and outsiders who have become tribal members, along with those from Flesh Eater Island, don't go there, and Land of Wanderers, Arabia. They said, we can hear them in the languages of these nations telling about the great and powerful things done by the Great Spirit. Many were amazed and confused and began to ask each other, what can this mean? I mean, if you saw this, imagine how weird and wonderful this would be. And they said, what does this mean? But others in the crowd just laughed and said, they're drunk on new wine. But stands on the rock, Peter, along with the other 11 message bearers, stood up in the crowd and with a loud voice said, tribal members from far away and all who live in the village of peace, that is Jerusalem, listen closely to me and I will tell you what this means. No one among us is drunk on wine, for it is still the middle of the morning. This is not what you think it is. This is what the prophet, creator is the Great Spirit, or Joel, spoke of long ago when he said, in the last days, says Creator, I will rain down my Spirit upon all human beings from every nation. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, young warriors will see visions, and elders will have dreams. When that time comes, my Spirit will rain down on all who serve me, both men and women, and they will boldly speak my words. There will be powerful signs and omens in the spirit world above and in the earth below, blood and fire, with clouds of smoke. The sun will grow dark, and the moon will be red like blood, as the great and dreadful day of the Creator shines like the sun. Then the ones who cry out to the Great Spirit will be made whole and set free. This is strange. This is weird. And yet it's wonderful. These people were captivated by what they saw and what they heard. They were absolutely captivated. I had this happen to me one time, and I still don't fully believe it. But this was when I was in college. I was in like a Christian, like a Bible college, studying to do mission work. And we were in a small group of people praying together. And I remember we were like kneeling on some old, dank carpet, like every college campus has somewhere. And we were praying. And at some point, I remember praying in tongues. And when I opened my eyes, my friend Alex from Costa Rica was staring at me and weeping. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "You've just been speaking the most eloquent Spanish I've ever heard about how amazing God is." I could tell you, I don't think I was speaking Spanish, but that's what he heard. It could be that I was speaking Spanish, but I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. All I know is that it impacted Alex in such a profound way. And today he's a worship leader in a very large church in Costa Rica, absolutely in love with the Lord. Strange stuff, weird and wonderful stuff is meant to happen among us. Part of the problem for me, I don't know if you would identify as this, part of the problem with me is I want to invite people in, and I don't want them, I don't want to be weird in front of people, right? Anybody else? Does anybody just like being the weird one in the room? No, none of us do. And so we try to tone it down. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever been standing, maybe it happened this morning, standing in a worship experience and you feel like, I just want to kneel, or I just want to put my hands up, or I just want to fill in the blank. And then you go, and then the next thought is, what will the person next to me, the person behind me, what will they think? We've all done this. We've all done this. And in some way, we probably missed out on something that God was going to do that day. Not forever. God is gracious. He gives us other opportunities. But we've all, well, I can't say we've all done this. I've done this, and maybe you'd identify with that. I want to focus on just mentioning, because in that verse we read, he talks about dreams and visions. Dreams and visions. Now, I'm going to share something that I want you to know has been a point of, in the past, it's no longer a point of shame for me. It's been something that I normally would not share because I wouldn't want to cause, especially like younger people that I was ministering to, I wouldn't want them to take this as permission. So I'm going to share a story with you. Again, at this time that I got the tattoo, so about 6 months before that, maybe even a bit further back, Randy and I were dating, and we were kind of newly dating. We'd been dating for a few months, but we knew we were serious about this. And Randy got an opportunity, kind of like almost like last minute. She got an opportunity to do a semester abroad in a place called Burkina Faso. Anyone heard of Burkina Faso? Yeah. It's in West Africa, I think French speaking, very Muslim nation. And so imagine me, I'm like, I don't think you should do this, you know? I had two reasons. One was unselfish, one was selfish. The selfish one was that I didn't want her to go away. We had just started dating. I didn't want her to go away for like 3.5 months. The unselfish reason was I was worried that something could happen. There are lots of things that happen there. And without me there to protect her, you know what I mean? Like sometimes guys, we can feel like that. But Randy went to Burkina Faso, or she said she'd go to Burkina Faso. Well, the weekend before she was to leave, we wanted to do like a little getaway, but we wanted to keep it PG. We wanted to, keep barriers in place. And so I said, what if we go down to Austin in Texas? At the time we were living in Dallas, which is boring and flat. And the only good thing about Dallas is the food. Whereas in Austin, there's lots of live music and culture and hills and outdoor and activities. And I said, let's go to Austin, but I have family there. We can stay with my family. So we decided to stay with my family. That'd be safe. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? That'd be safe, right? That'd help us keep it PG. Thank you, Josh. By the way, isn't everybody glad to have Josh and Katie back? It's so good to have you guys back. Can't wait to hear about your time there. I think we should just do a Q&A and just tell us all about it. So where was I in the story? Oh yeah, the part I don't want to get to. Okay, so my family there, to their credit, they gave us some barriers, but they didn't police those barriers. And so we ended up breaking those barriers. Again, it was a romantic time. She was leaving, and I wasn't going to see her for a few months. And so things happened that probably shouldn't have happened. I know none of you have ever. So the next day, we drove back to Dallas. It's about a 3-hour drive, and we both felt terrible. I think we were equally feeling that we let the other down. I know that's what I was feeling. And what happens, and this is why in Song of Solomon, God says, don't awaken love before its proper time. Immediately, what was introduced into our relationship, which until that point had been so pure and vibrant and moving forward, was regret, shame, doubt, are we even supposed to be together? Now, we didn't want to say any of this to each other because she was going away. So we just kind of said, the thing like, hey, I'm sorry we let that happen. Yes, she's sorry. I'm sorry. We prayed for each other, and then I sent her off to Africa. And immediately I began thinking, I need to break up with her because I clearly cannot be trusted with another person's heart, soul, and body. I think she started thinking the same thing. But we prayed about it, and we both reached out to our mentors. I had a mentor here there in the States. She had a mentor that was there in Burkina Faso, and they prayed for us and they ministered to us. They helped us walk through that season. And then I began praying, okay, God, if we're supposed to be together, would you just show us? Would you show us? Would you show me? And one day, I was waiting tables. I was working as a waiter, and so I was supposed to go into work at about 4:00. I was taking a quick, power nap before I was going into work, and I had the most beautiful dream in that moment of seeing Randy like walking down the aisle toward me. And when I woke up, I just felt God's presence in the room and over me, and it felt so beautiful. It felt like that was the sign he was giving me. And I ended up finding out later that at about the same time, Randy was sitting on a porch in Burkina Faso on a dusty evening, and she was having a vision of almost the same thing. I think, but from her perspective, right? She wasn't seeing herself walk down the aisle. She was like walking down the aisle toward me. That happened at the same time. And that was something that I think we both needed to get over that hurt and that to heal that hurt and that sense of, just hurt, that sense of letting each other down and also being let down. That dream set us on a trajectory that, I don't think we would have stayed together otherwise. Now, that's just a personal thing. But there have been, it's just a personal thing, but it's led to our children. It's led to different opportunities we've had to minister. But there have been other dreams and other visions. I wish I could just go through different ones that I've heard and know. I wish I could just ask you, have you ever had a dream or a vision? Have you ever sensed God? Like sometimes I think we can think of visions as like something like takes you over and you see, but a lot of times actually a vision can just happen when you're kind of daydreaming. Like this happened for Peter. Do you know the story of Peter? It's like midday. He's hungry, but he's taking a nap. And he starts daydreaming and then actually falls asleep, something like that. He's resting, he's hungry. And what does he dream about? He dreams about food. But he dreams about all this food that he's not supposed to eat, like shrimp and bacon and, because he's a Jew. Probably not bacon, but all these unclean foods. And there's like a net being let down from heaven. And I imagine it's like shaped like this, and it's all going into his mouth, and he's tasting some of the most savory, delicious foods that he's ever wanted to eat but couldn't. And then in the dream, he hears this voice that says, don't call, let's see, I want to get this right. Because, does anybody remember what he says? Say it again. Don't call anything impure that God has made clean. At about the same time, this man gets a vision to send someone to Peter. Actually, sorry, before this time, this man had been praying and has a vision to send someone to Peter, to bring Peter, to give them the message of salvation. And so he wakes up from this dream, probably hungry, his mouth watering. And then he gets this visitor who says, can you come to these Gentile people and share the message? I'm paraphrasing this, so I hope I'm not getting anything wrong. The point is, that dream, as he interpreted it, gave him the, what would you say? The permission to take this message that had been sort of concealed for Jewish audiences only to the Gentiles. And that was where they first became Gentile Christians. So, again, to get back to my theme as I started, by the way, how much time do we have? I should wrap up, huh? Okay. Does that mean yes, wrap up? Okay, yeah. So, we need to get back to where we started. We need to even in some ways maybe just repent to the Lord for not pursuing these things that are weird and wonderful, like dreams and visions. Now, how do you pursue dreams and visions? I'm going to give you two, I think, simple ways. One is ask. Ask for dreams and visions. Just ask. You can do it right now if you want. You can do it tonight before you go to bed. But just ask, God, would you give me a dream, a vision? I want to encounter you through dreams and visions. Okay? Can anyone do that? Is anyone not able to do that? Not able to ask God for dreams and visions? The other thing is, put something beside your bed, besides your phone, not your phone. We know that's not good. We still do it. But put something beside your bed, like a notebook and a pen. And when you wake up from a dream, just jot it down. You can just jot down a couple of keywords. In my experience, if you just jot down a couple of keywords, you'll remember a large chunk of that dream. If you want, if it's a really profound dream, you wake up and you feel God's presence, write the whole thing down. But the key is just ask and then steward whatever God gives you. Steward whatever God gives you. If you need to just resort to using your phone and taking notes from your phone, do that. But I would encourage you, go out by faith and buy a new journal. Don't spend too much, but go out by faith, buy a new journal and ask God, give me dreams. And then finally, just bring these dreams, once you have one, to someone that you trust. Ask them to pray for you. Don't jump to interpreting it. Sometimes you'll just know. Sometimes you'll just know in your heart what this is pointing to, what it's meaning, what God is calling you to. Sometimes it can be kind of confusing. What does this mean? And share that with Christians that you trust, that can pray for you and ask God to show you and reveal to you in time what these dreams mean. Sometimes I've heard that sometimes, I haven't had this happen, but sometimes you can write down a dream and it may go years that you don't really understand what it was, and then you look back and you realize, oh, that's what it meant. That's what it meant. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. We're going to be continuing on this series in the weeks to come. We're going to be talking about other weird and wonderful things that as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we need to tap into. Because the signs and wonders that Jesus did, Peter says, proved who he was, proved that he was who he said he was. And then God used signs and wonders and miracles, weird and wonderful things, to prove that his followers were sent by him. Now, we can all tap into a little bit of that. And as a group together, we can experience it in a powerful way. Whether it's praying for our neighbors, praying for a sick person, praying for have you ever been with someone, they tell you, I had the weirdest dream last night? Has that ever happened to you? I was with some people one time. They said, I had the weirdest dream last night. She said the dream, and immediately I felt like I knew what it was. I said, I don't know for sure, but I feel like this means this. Okay, so we're gonna save a couple of minutes. If this is something you'd like prayer for, you'd like to experience more, and even if there's other things I haven't talked about tonight, but you'd like to experience more of the Holy Spirit flowing through you, empowering you, encouraging you to step into the more of what He's calling you into. If you'd like prayer for this, we're going to invite you up.